Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the ISCC Election Commission, I want to give you some important dates and events which are going to happen from this coming Sunday all the way up to 27th of November when we will have the general election. So on November the 13th, that is coming Sunday, we will have the first and the only Meet the Candidate session where all the candidates will be there and you will have a chance to talk to them and ask questions if you want. Then we will have the first early election date as November 15th, 16th, 18th, and 20th. So these 3 days or 4 days, you will have a chance to vote early. The voting timing will be 12:30 to 1:45. That will be open to all. And then a second session on each day between 2:15 and 3:45. The general election will be held on the last Sunday of this month. That will be 27th of November. And on that day, we will have voting from 10 a.m. all the way up till Maghrib time. Inshallah, that will be 5:15 or so. The votes will be counted immediately after Maghrib Salah, and we will, inshallah, announce the winners and your new Amir and the new board members immediately after. Regarding voting, when you come for vote, cast your vote, please make sure that you have a state-issued picture ID, a driver license or a state-issued picture ID. If you bring your passport, then you must have some other document to confirm your residence in the Collin County, like a utility bill, telephone bill, water bill, or some sort of document which will prove that you are living at the address which you have given at the time of registration. Lastly, the Shura has given us the registered voter list about 10 days ago. And we have a voter list of around 4,000 plus members. I know that's a very exhaustive list. We don't have so many of them here now. Some of them have moved out. But just in case, if your name is not on that list, that means you are not eligible to vote. And so at that time, please refrain from arguing or asking to add new names or add this name or that name. We have no authority to add new names. So please be courteous and inshallah register. We will take new registration forms and you will be eligible to vote next year or 2 years from for the next election. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وعزيزنا وكريمنا ورحيمنا ونبينا وسندنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وأزواجه وأنصاره وعلينا معهم أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى عز وجل في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اتقوا الله حيثما كنت. Respected ulama, honorable elders, beloved brothers and sisters, a few days ago I received a phone call from a friend of mine, a near and dear friend of mine, and he called me to ask me a question whose answer is very easy, and I know at the back of my hand I've dozens of times, way too many times. But every time the question is projected towards me, I always am at a loss of words on how to truly express the answer, and I always walk out feeling as if there was a level of inadequacy in my response. He called me and he said, my mother is on the ventilator and it's been a week and I can't see my mother in this situation. And we know that when people, may Allah protect us all, and one of the responsibilities we have is to be there at people's last moments. And I've seen it one too many times, of being in a room and having to make that decision and condoling the family, and being in the proximity as Malik al-Maut enters and exits, and to try to condole that heart. I know myself, I don't have the words. And then he broke down and he said, Wasim, you know what the saddest of all of this is? The saddest thing about all of this? I said, what is it? He said, none of my other siblings care. No one else cares about the situation of my mother. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Bani Israel teaches us a dua for our parents. وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Rabba yurabbi, my Allah, Rabbi irhamhuma, Rabbi, my Allah, irham, have mercy, huma, upon them too, kama. The dua starts with Rabbi irhamhuma, with the Rabb meaning Allah. Then the second half of the dua is kama rabbayani saghira. The word rabbayani is used. It's similar to the word Rabb, which means Lord, but Rabb comes from the word tarbiyah, to nurture. Mothers are called raba'ib in the Quran. Wa raba'ibukum allati. In the Quran, Allah refers to mothers with the same word Allah refers to His own name, Rabb. Obviously the connotation is different, but the status could definitely be understood, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to call upon Him to seek mercy and do dua for your parents, He's utilizing the very word that we call upon Him to ask Him for anything and everything that we need. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was once asked by a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, if I do everything and I fulfill all the things my parents ask me, have I fulfilled their right? And then Nabi alayhi salam said, La, hum fa'ala li baqa'ik wa fa'alta li mawtihima. He says, they did it out of love and because they wanted to, and so you could excel. You did it just so that they could stop talking. You did it just so they don't have anything else to say. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said every day in the morning, 2 doors open up. Either 2 doors of Jannah or 2 doors of hell. And if a person has one parent, then 1 door, based on how their parents are with them. We know the narrations. We've heard about it. And we think to ourselves that they don't get me. They don't understand. They don't know what I'm going through. I have my own life. We forget the sacrifices they made. We can't make the sacrifices they did. Most of us are immigrant children. Most of the youth today, your parents are like my parents. They left their friends, they left their family, they sacrificed it all. I know my dad's relationship with his own mother and father was incredible. He didn't live with them, but he was the closest to them. When both mother and father passed away, though he didn't live with them for 3 decades, both mother and father passed away. In Hyderabad of my dad's, they both passed away in his arms. Dad after Jumu'ah Salah, last Zamzam my dad put in his mouth. Mother in his hands during Ramadan. The only one day in my dad's life he didn't go for Taraweeh. He said, today I'm going to stay behind. And that was the day his mother passed away. And the son whose house they stayed in for 3-4 decades, neither for the father, neither for the mother was present. And one time when I met him, he saw me and he said, I did the khidmat, but your dad got the du'as. He said, one of the difficult things of looking after parents is to keep them happy. He said, and I think that I messed up on this thing, and I lost out on this. You see, kama tudinu tudan. The way you do, you will be treated. There was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and he comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, my dad asks me for a lot. He expects a lot from me. And immigrant parents expect a lot from their children. Part of their bias is because of the sacrifices of what they had to do. And they all did it all for one reason, to see the kids excel. And the kids are just too busy on the TikToks and moving their legs that way or doing this dance move. But the sacrifices they placed and everything that they left behind, we could never do that for America. We can barely shift out of our locale or our community because of our comfort zone. But they took on a huge sacrifice. So one companion comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, Ya Rasulullah, my dad expects a lot from me. And I make money, finally making money right now. He wants me to pay for this bill and pay for this thing and that thing. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, call your dad. So the father comes. And the father arrives. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at him and says, what's going on? He says, Ya Rasulullah. He said, all I do is that I ask my kid for little expenses. For what? For me, my wife, some relatives, that's it. Then Nabi ﷺ turns towards him and he says, what are the words that are echoing in your heart that not even your ears have heard? What are the words echoing in your heart that not even your ears have ever heard? And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I'll tell you something. I knew you were the prophet, but today it sealed the deal. I knew you were the one. But the fact that you're telling me what I'm saying in my heart, and I have never even heard my own ears say it, the Prophet ﷺ said, let me hear what you're saying in your heart. And many times parents won't share the anguish of their heart and the pain and all the time that they have sacrificed to get us to where we are today. So he begins the poem and he says, غَدَوْتُكَ مَوْلُودًا وَعُلْتُكَ يَافِعًا تَعُلُّ بِمَا أُحَنِّي عَلَيْكَ تَنْهَلُ إذا ليلتك نابتك شكواك لم أبت لشكواك إلا ساحرا أتململ كأني أنا المتروق دونك بالذي ترقت به فعيناي تهمل. He says, you know, you grew up all these years on my income. Everything. You learned how to talk, you had the food, all that was me. Every moment, everything on your body, for years, I was the only one that looked after you. Today I'm asking you for a few days. إِذَا لَيْلَتَكَ, when the night used to come and you would get sick, you would fall asleep, but I would be awake crying. It was as if I was the sick person and you were the healthy one. تخاف ردى نفسي وأنني لأعلم أن الموت حتم مؤجل. He said, I know death is prescribed, but the fear in my heart was that my child may get lost. Yaqub alayhi salam cried his eyes out, وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَا, until the eyes became white and he became blind. Yusuf alayhi salam says, Dad, you would have lost me in the dunya, found me in the hereafter. Why cry so much in this dunya for a child that you have lost? You are a prophet. Your son is a prophet. After 40 years and one tafsir, 80 years they meet. The whole legacy of Yaqub alayhi salam, all we know is of a child that got lost of his. Much of his prophethood we don't know, of his ministry we don't know, besides this one aspect. And he says, my son, that wasn't the pain. I didn't cry for losing you in the dunya. I didn't finish your tarbiyah and you were a beautiful young man. And I was scared that the dunya would rob you of your iman and I would lose you in the hereafter. And that's what made me cry myself blind. So he says, it was as if I was the person who was sick and you were the person that was healthy. Then he goes on and he says, فَلَمَّا بَلَغْتَ السِّنَّ وَالْغَايَةَ الَّتِي إِلَيْهَا مَدَى وَكُنْتُ فِيكَ أُؤَمِّلُ. He said, you know, when we were expecting you, I had a lot of dreams. I thought we'll be like this when you're 1 and 2 and 5 and 10. And I started saving for your college fund and I started getting clothes ready for you and planning an entire future for you. And I had these dreams and ambitions. And as you started walking and talking and I thought you would come and fall into that perspective and vision that I had. He said, فَجَزَائِي. He said, you turned around, and what did you give me? غِلَّةً وَفَضَاضَةً. You just gave me hatred and animosity. It was as if we had nothing to talk about anymore. كَأَنَّكَ الْمُنْعِمُ الْمُتَفَضِّلُ. It's as if you were the father and I'm the son, as if you did everything, I did nothing. So when you were just at that moment that I was waiting my entire life, you'll be a teenager, you'll be in college, you'll be married, you'll be having kids. At this stage, when I was expecting that you would do this and you would be like this, you shattered my dreams. He said, Ya laytaka lam tara haqqa ubuwati. My son, it's okay. Don't consider me your father. وَلَكِنْ تَفْعَلْ مَا الْجَارُ الْمَجْعُورُ يَفْعَلْ. But we live in the same house. At least treat me like your neighbor. Don't give me a father's right. Treat me like your neighbor. Treat me like a friend. And Rasulullah ﷺ was profusely crying. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Anta wa maluka li abik, the famous words that are used in the books of fiqh for the legality of the child's wealth and the parent's wealth. And when the discussion is done, this narration is brought forth. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Anta, you wa maluka, and all your wealth. Li abik is for your parents. How can your parents owe you? Like when I hear this concept, it's foreign to me. Like, it's barakah in your wealth. For you to spend on your parents, what you do will happen to you. There was a young family with a young boy, elderly parent, but the father had a bad eyesight, so he would always drop things and break dishes. So the husband and wife spoke, and they said, look, your father makes a lot of mess. He said, okay, he breaks a lot of dishes. He said, I know. A lot of money is wasted. He said, I know, I'm sorry. So let's get him a wooden bowl so it doesn't break. Okay, and put him to the side. Too much noise, we can't enjoy the food. He said, okay. So they put the man to the side, give him a wooden bowl. And as the family would eat, tears would flow down the father's eyes. Then he turns around a few days later, he's coming home, and he sees his little boy playing with some wood. He says, my boy, what are you doing? He said, I'm making a wooden bowl. He said, why? He said, for you and mom when you guys get older. A father and a son got in a fight. And Allahu Akbar, how far we transgress. The son grabbed the father by the collar and pushed him against the living room. And as he got to the kitchen, the father yelled and said, enough! No more, my son, not a step further. He said, we've been fighting for the last hour, you haven't said a word. Why now? He said, 30 years ago, I too grabbed my father by the collar and dragged him up to this point. He said, my son, if you take another step, then you would do more dhulm than I had done to my father. Allama Alusi rahmatullah alayh mentions this poem, very powerful and beautiful poem in Ruhul Ma'ani. Bear with me through the poem. He says, أغرى امرأ يوما غلاما جاهلا بنقوده حتى ينال به الوطر. A man comes to a boy and says to him, listen, I need a favor. I'll give you some money. I need a favor. أغرى يوما غلاما جاهلا امرأ يوما غلاما جاهلا بنقوده حتى ينال به الوطر. قال ائتني بفؤاد أمك ولك الجواهر والدراهم والدرار. فمضى وأغمض خنجرا في صدرها والقلب أخرجه وعاد على الأثر. ولكن من فرط سرعته هوى فتدحرج القلب معفر إذ عثر. فنادى قلب الأم وهو معفر ولدي حبيبي هل أصابك من ضرر. فكأن صوته رغم حنوه وغضب السماء عليه على الولد انهمر. فاستل خنجره ليطعن نفسه طعنا ليبقى عبرة لمن اعتبر فنادى قلب الأم كف يدا ولا تطعن قلبي مرتين على أثر. For those who understood the Arabic, mabarook to you. For the rest, I hope you learn the language. A man comes to a boy and he says, listen, boy, I'll give you some gold, and I'll give you some diamond, and I'll give you some jewels, and I'll make you the wealthiest man. But I have a favor. And the boy says, tell me. He responds and he says, I'tini bifu'adi ummika ya fatan. Bring me the heart of your mother. فَمَضَى, and he went, وَأَغْمَضَ خَنْجَرًا فِي صَدْرِهَا. He went and carved her heart out of her chest. وَلَكِنْ مِنْ فَرْطَ سُرْعَتِهِ هَوَى. And as he's running back to become the happiest man and the wealthiest man in the world, he slipped. And as he slipped, the heart fell out and it was in dirt. And as it was bleeding, and it fell to the ground. And in that state, the heart called out and said, Waladi, my child, Habibi, my beloved, Hal asabaka min darar? Are you okay? Fastalla khanjarahu. I took my knife and I said, let me end my life. For there is no life without my mother. And after what I have done, I felt as if the heavens were to break upon me. And as I advanced the knife towards my own heart, Nada qalbul ummi marratan, my mother's heart called out one more time and said, my child, hold your hand back. Don't stab my heart twice. Today, we metaphorically carve the hearts of our mothers and fathers out for our own desires, for this girl or for this boy or for this friend or for this job or for this desire. What's the difference? What's the difference? We kill them while they're alive. How many white hair on them is dedicated to our problems? Is courtesy of our insanity. How much of their pain and their aches is because of us? Reflect and go back. If they're alive, make them happy. And if they have passed on, do dua. A man committed zina and went to Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma and he said, I have destroyed my hereafter. He said, is your mother alive? He said, no. Father? He said, yes. He said, just keep on doing tawbah. Someone asked, why'd you ask about his mother? He said, I do not know of any deed that will please Allah more than getting your mother happy. Allah has put Jannah underneath it. My friend was crying and saying, Wasim, my Jannah is gone. My Jannah is gone. You see, we ask the du'as of our mother and daughters, but we provoke the curses of them. We ask for the du'as, but we provoke the curses, and we know the story of Jurayj. And the story of Jurayj rocks us to the core. Jurayj was a better man than any of us and all of us put together. And he did a good action that upset his parent. But yet, the curse of his mother afflicted him. When he used to go by after his mother passed away, he used to walk by the house of his mother and he used to smirk. And someone asked him, why do you smirk over here? He said, my mother is gone, but her curse still stares at me in the eyes. My mother is gone, but her curse still stares at me in the eyes. To conclude today's khutbah, I'm going to share a poem with you that I read when I was maybe like 14 years old. And I don't think I've ever been able to read it in a lecture before in my life. At least I don't recall. Maybe right in the beginning when I was much younger. But today I wanted to share this with you. And I hope that it serves as a mending moment for us. And a reflective moment for us. And to better our relationships. For from the signs of the day of judgment is that mothers will give birth to their masters. And that sons will hate their fathers and love their friends. When you came into this world, she held you in her arms. You thanked her by crying while she was happy. When you were 1 year old, she fed you and bathed you. You thanked her by crying all night long. When you were 2 years old, she taught you how to walk. You thanked her by running away when she called you. When you were 3 years old, she made all the meals with love. You thanked her by throwing your plate on the floor. When you were 4, she gave you some crayons as a gift. You thanked her by drawing all over the walls and the table. When you were 5 years old, she dressed you for Eid. You thanked her by dropping food all over your clothes. When you were 6 years old, she walked you to school for the first day, excited and happy. You thanked her by yelling and saying, "I don't want to go to school." When you were 7, she brought you a basketball. And you thanked her by throwing it into your neighbor's window. When you were 8 years old, she handed you some ice cream. And you thanked her by dropping it on yourself, dropping it all over her lap. When you were 9 years old, she took you to a Quran class. You thanked her by not even opening the Quran after you came home. When you were 10 years old, she drove you from soccer practice to this practice, and this after school to this engagement. You thanked her by jumping out of the car and not even looking back. When you were 11, she took you and your friends to a game or to an activity to the mall. You thanked her by telling her, "Please stay by yourself. I don't want to be seen around you." When you were 12, she warned you not to watch certain TV shows. You thanked her by waiting till she was gone. When you were 13, she suggested, "Beta, wear this, wear that, you will look good in it." And you thanked her by telling her, "Mom, you have no taste." When you were 14, she paid for a vacation with your friends. You thanked her by not even texting her back or calling her. When you were 15, she came home from work looking for a hug. You thanked her by staying in your bedroom door locked. When you were 16, she taught you how to drive a car. You thanked her by taking it every chance you could. When you were 17, she was expecting an important call. You thanked her by being on the phone all night long. When you were 18, you graduated from high school. And you thanked her by staying out all night long. Growing old and gray, you didn't notice while you stray. When you were 19, she paid for your college tuition and drove you to campus, carried your bags. You thanked her by saying goodbye outside the dorm. When you were 20, she asked whether you were seeing someone. And you thanked her by saying it's none of your business. When you were 21, she suggested certain careers to you. And you thanked her by saying, "I don't want to be like you." When you were 22, she hugged you at college graduation. And she was emotional. And you thanked her by asking her for money for your next trip. When you were 23, she got you furniture for your first apartment. You thanked her by telling your friends it was ugly. When you were 24, she met your fiancé and asked about future plans. You turned around and said, "Mother, please don't talk a lot." When you were 25, she helped pay for your wedding. And she cried and told you how deeply she loved you. You thanked her by moving halfway across the country. When you were 30, she called for some advice regarding the baby. And you thanked her by telling her things are different now. When you were 40, she called to remind you of a relative's birthday. You thanked her by saying, "I'm really busy now." When you were 50, she fell ill and needed you to take care of her. You thanked her by reading about the burden parents are upon the children. And slowly they withered away until one day they're no more. The hand who rocks the cradle may rock the world one day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give those whose parents are alive a long and healthy life and allow us to earn their du'as and them being pleased with us. And those whose parents have passed on, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive their sins and grant us the ability to do sadaqah jariyah for them. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم استغفر الله لي ولكم في سائر المسلمين فاستغفروه. الحمد لله العلي الأجل الواحد الفرد القديم الأول فأنت مليك الناس ربنا فاقبل ثم الصلاة على النبي الأفضل أما بعد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وعلينا معهم. اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين. اللهم احفظ دماء المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولمن له حق علينا يا رب العالمين. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. أقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا واعتدلوا فإن تسوية الصفوف من تمام الصلاة. سدوا الخلل واتموا الصف الأول فالأول. Please train the lines and fill in the gaps. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى. سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى. ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى. سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا. قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى. إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية. وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية. ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Kind request to please keep my friend Aqil's mother in your du'as. May Allah give her shifa kamila daima ajala mustamira.